Hermann," said one of the guests, pointing to a young engineer. "He has never had a card in his hand in his life. He has never in his life laid a wager. And yet he sits here till 5 o'clock in the morning watching our play." "Play interests me very much," said Hermann. "But I am not in a position to sacrifice the necessary in the hope of winning the superfluous. Hermann is a German. He is economical, that is all," observed Tomsky. "But if there is one person that I cannot understand, it is my grandmother, the Countess Anna Fedorovna." "How so?" inquired the guests. "I cannot understand," continued Tomsky, "how it is that my grandmother does not punt." "What is there remarkable about an old lady of 80 not punting?" said Narrator. "Then you do not know the reason why?" "No, really, haven't the faintest idea." "Oh, then listen. You must know that about 60 years ago, my grandmother went to Paris, where she created quite a sensation. People used to run after her to catch a glimpse of the Muscovite Venus. Richelieu made love to her, and my grandmother maintains that he almost blew out his brains in consequence of her cruelty. At that time, ladies used to play at faro. On one occasion at the court, she lost a very considerable sum to the Duke of Orleans. On returning home, my grandmother removed the patches from her face, took off her hoops, informed my grandfather of her loss at the gaming table, and ordered him to pay the money. My deceased grandfather, as far as I remember, was a sort of house steward to my grandmother. He dreaded her like fire. But on hearing of such a heavy loss, he almost went out of his mind. He calculated the various sums she had lost, and pointed out to her that in 6 months she had spent 500,000 francs, that neither their Moscow nor Saratov estates were in Paris, and finally refused point blank to pay the debt. My grandmother gave him a box on the ear, and slept by herself as a sign of her displeasure. The next day she sent for her husband, hoping that this domestic punishment had produced an effect upon him. But she found him inflexible. For the first time in her life, she entered into reasonings and explanations with him, thinking to be able to convince him by pointing out to him that there are debts and debts, and that there is a great difference between a prince and a coachmaker. But it was all in vain. My grandfather still remained obdurate. And the matter did not rest there. My grandmother did not know what to do. She had shortly before become acquainted with a very remarkable man. You have heard of Count Saint-Germain, about whom so many marvellous stories are told. You know that he represented himself as the wandering Jew, as the discoverer of the elixir of life, of the philosopher's stone, and so forth. Some laughed at him as a charlatan, but Casanova in his memoirs says that he was a spy. Be that as it may, Saint-Germain, in spite of the mystery surrounding him, was a very fascinating person, and was much sought after in the best circles of society. Even to this day my grandmother retains an affectionate recollection of him, and becomes quite angry if anyone speaks disrespectfully of him. My grandmother knew that Saint-Germain had large sums of money at his disposal. She resolved to have recourse to him, and she wrote a letter to him asking him to come to her without delay. The queer old man immediately waited upon her, and found her overwhelmed with grief. She described to him in the blackest colours the barbarity of her husband, and ended by declaring that her whole hope depended upon his friendship and amiability. Saint-Germain reflected. "I could advance you the sum you want," said he, "but I know that you would not rest easy until you had paid me back, and I should not like to bring fresh troubles upon you. But there is another way of getting out of your difficulty. You can win back your money." "But my dear Count," replied my grandmother, "I tell you that I haven't any money left." "Money is not necessary," replied Saint-Germain. "Be pleased to listen to me." Then he revealed to her a secret for which each of us would give a good deal. The young officers listened with increased attention. Tomsky lit his pipe, puffed away for a moment, and then continued.